What's going on? You know what time it is? It is time for Elevated Vibes right here on IntellectualRadio.com. Now, hey, you know, it's your boy Abdul Rashid along with
Boss man, what's up? Welcome back.
Yes. And hey, y'all know the number to call 708-223-8953. Once again, that is 708-223-8953. Or you can hit us up on Facebook Live. And let me remind you that we are an iHeart radio station. Now, hey, y'all, check it out. What we talking about today? The 1619 Project and the critical race theory, the uproar about it.
There's a bunch of hooey.
Now, y'all, check it out. And I know y'all remember this. Knowledge makes man unfit to be a slave. And I'm going to say it again for the people in back. Knowledge makes man unfit to be a slave. That is a profound statement from the great Frederick Douglass. Now, by law, a slave was considered property or chattel of another human being. By nature, no man can own another. With knowledge and understanding, no individual, group, or nation can get away with the oppression of another. Even though as minorities, we have made strides. Complete knowledge has been denied. Those who stand with, some would say, the oppressor status quo, instead of being ready to welcome this knowledge to make this world a better place for the next generation, they rather fight some of the process or all of the process, like critical race theory and a 1619 Project tooth and nail. Now, the thing is, if they claim they want to make this a better world, how would you fight something that would take it there with understanding? I'm going to bring it to you. Go ahead, boss man.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Let's talk about what critical race theory is so that we all have a context for understanding, because there's a lot going on out there. I was just watching a special this week on HBO on John Oliver. And so the people can't even tell you what critical race theory is, but they want to talk to you and tell you that you shouldn't teach it. You know, so, and I'm going to take a minute. I'm just going to read from a little blurb here from edweek.org that just gives a very brief blurb about critical race theory. But it says it's an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. The basic tenets of critical race theory emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. So the whole idea behind critical race theory is that we look at racism as it has been inbred into our political system, our educational system, and our finance system. And we want to talk about why people aren't in a certain place compared to other places. And so it just takes a look to say, okay, what are those things that have held back, and how has that racism affected a certain class or a group of people? It's not teaching anti-white, it's not meant to make people feel guilty. It's meant to take a critical look to say what systems and structures have been put in place. And let's have a discussion about it. Let's be truthful about it. Like, when we were coming up, we didn't discover about the horrors of Columbus when he first came to America. I didn't hear about that until well into college. It was like, we want to teach history as these people were heroes, but they were heroes at what cost? We want to talk about, Thomas Jefferson owning, over 300 slaves. And we always talk about Sally Hemingway as if, this was a relationship based out of love and marriage and stuff. But the fact is, she was a 14-year-old girl that was a slave that bore his children, and we can take a critical look at that and say that was wrong. You can have, there seems to be this belief that you have to have one or the other. Like, you can't have the hero and the villain. Like, sometimes, and that's how people are. We are neither hero nor villain. We exist in two dichotomies. So it's great. Thomas Jefferson, exceptional writer. Great thoughts and all that stuff that he put into the Declaration of Independence. But we also have to recognize he's a hypocrite
I
because
was
at
just
the
about
same
to go into
time,
that thing of being hypocritical
yeah,
because
at the same time that he is talking about the freedom of man and being born with certain inalienable rights, he owned a plantation. He was raping a 14-year-old girl. He was raping a 14-year-old girl that had children for him. And that some of these children still, their ancestors, the Monticello family or whatever that is, the descendants don't want to recognize. So we have to have an honest look. And let me be honest, some of this critical race pushback or 1619 pushback isn't because it's fundamentally wrong. It's just a rallying cry for the right side to push back against. There are those who always want to be able to say, what about reverse racism, or what about this, or what about it's not that it's something that's fundamentally wrong. We can have a critical discussion about the history of America and what it means. To say that, I was listening to I forget, one of the former Republicans who ran for president. It wasn't Rick Perry. I forget who it was, but no, it was the other one that looks like a weasel. I can't think of his name. But he was like, Europeans came here and turned this country into something when it was nothing. And it's like, are you serious? Are you serious? Like you forget about the whole class of people that was here, and their contributions. And so we need to have an honest discussion about how our policies affect the Native Americans. Not only how our policies affect the Native Americans, but y'all dedicated a whole 200 years to importing a race of people here. After you desecrated the lands and stuff, now you're importing people to work that land. And we need to have a critical understanding about the contributions of minorities to America and what they did, about the Chinese labor and how they built the railroads and things like that. We need to have a critical discussion about these things. And there are those who just don't want to tell the truth about our history.
And that's the thing. All right. Just like how you put that. All right. Now, how can I say? America always said, oh, well, no, what's the quote? Truth, justice, and the American way.
Well, those two are the oxymoron.
It doesn't work.
Right.
But so many have followed that so-called quote for who knows how long. So now you have people that want to talk about something. If it's going to make your children feel bad or whatever, if it changes their attitude about things, if it opens up their eyes to go a better way than what their ancestors have done, then let them feel bad. But you understand what I'm saying? Let them feel bad. If it's going to change them, where they will not act like maybe their uncle's cousin, whoever twice removed, however you put it, and they're going to act in a just way, in a fair way, in a respectable way, have the laws that is fair to every soul on it in this country, forget it, on this planet, then let them feel bad. This is one of their biggest rallying cries, but how do you ever expect to change for the better, to build the better, if you can't do that? I mean, sometimes it's like we all need that raw truth. We may not like it. It may be very bitter, but it makes us a better person.
I think part of the fundamental issues that we are having now in America is that we haven't told the truth about our history. We've wanted to hide the history. We've wanted to run away from our history. And in South Africa, they had the Truth and Reconciliation, where people came forth and admitted their crimes. Now, you say you can't do that here in America, Mike, because slavery's been over for 200 some years. But we have failed to have a honest and critical conversation at all, or as the British say, at all, about race relations here in America.
But even if you like that saying, oh, it's been over, get over it, or however they want to call it. But if you're still feeling the effects of it, then there's a problem.
but we don't want to acknowledge that.
Right.
That's first of all, we have first and foremost, we like to talk about these problems in a generic sense. Like we know that white households have 5 times the wealth of black households. We know that when black kids go to colleges, they tend not to do as well as students of non-color. We know that students of color come out with more than double the debt of students of non-color. And so we talk about these things in the abstract, but when it comes down to fundamentally doing something or targeting policies that would change, we don't want to do that, because in America we believe in equality, but not equity. Equality means that what's good for you is good for everybody across the board. Equity looks at it and it says, okay, given your situation, how can I raise you up to be equal? And so we have a problem with equity in this country, and the fact is that, yeah, you may have to have some policies in place that favor a certain group in order to make them equal to the group that is predominant and has had all the advantages since this country has been founded. But we don't want to do that. Matter of fact, our Supreme Court is, I believe, looking at 2 or 3 cases right now in which affirmative action, as we know it, may come to an end. Even though we know that as a whole, as a people, as students, we learn better when our classes are more diversified. But yet we want to continue with these policies that, these colorblind policies, and stick our heads in the sand because, it's not equal. But we also want to ignore the history of racism and prejudice in this country and how that impacts, students of color in our cities, and how they don't have the same wealth that the inner city schools don't have the same wealth as some of the suburban schools, and how that may impact admission into college. We don't look at legacy. Legacy is a form of a form of getting the hands up. Just because your parents went there, your siblings went there, you should have the right to go there. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
If it's supposed to be merit, then everybody should get in on their merit, not based on legacy, or you shouldn't get points for having siblings or get points for anything. It's like it should be based, okay, we're going to go strictly by the numbers. But here's the thing. If we go strictly by the numbers, a lot of people going to be hurt because as it stands, and this is not no stereotype or anything like that, people of Asian descent tend to do a lot better, more so than even their people, white counterparts. So if we're looking at all the schools and all you seeing there's children of Asian descent in the schools and it's based on meritocracy, well, then where your complaints going to come from? Then what you're going to talk about? How unfair it is, how hard they study. You know what I'm saying? And that's not to say like, I don't want to be, cited out saying, all Asian people are smart. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want that. But as a whole, Asian Americans tend to perform academically, be one of the top performing academic groups. And so if we go strictly by those numbers, there's going to be a whole lot more Asians than whites or blacks or Hispanics in the schools.
I hear you. Now, even touching on the Asian thing, and nobody's attacking or nothing like that.
No, that's not my point. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying you brought it up, and then
from an academic viewpoint,
right? And you brought it up, and it was just something that I found out about that I feel that should be put out here that we can also conversate that would deal also with critical race theory, 1619 Project, and so forth. There's a group here in Illinois, Teach. All right, this is stands for Teaching Equitable Asian American Community History.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now they enacted a Teach Act. All right. Mm-hmm. In Chicago here. The thing is, all right, a group like this that has gotten some leeway. It's not a nationwide leeway, mm-hmm. but it's some leeway. Do you feel that they should get in bed with some of those who's trying to push the critical race theory, the 1619 Project, from getting past all these bans from these other states to help out? Because you got there, should you not help the next man?
I mean, I don't know a lot about this group, but any group that shines a light on the history of America and brings to it a new perspective that's grounded in fact and history, I'm all for. Like,
Mhm.
there's so much in history that we don't know about, that can impact the way that we view things, and especially through the current lens of how we see things now. Like when you learn about redlining and the impact that it has had on Black economics and Black household and Black wealth, well, then it helps you to understand, why people are locked into certain neighborhoods and communities as they exist now. Like literally, the banks took and put red lines around certain areas where they would not lend money, and literally locked people, in essence, from 1940 until it was outlawed by the Housing Discrimination Act. Um, Locked a generation of people out of wealth. Like I'm talking about generations, multiple generations. So when you're talking about the inequity within households right now, we can trace it right back to redlining and things like that. When you hear about people literally being forced on off their lands in sundown towns or having to leave because they were going to be lynched, these are all things that contribute to the disparagement in wealth and outcome gaps. These things, the things in history don't happen in a vacuum, and we like to treat it like it happened in a vacuum, like, oh, and then there's this always, well, how long you gonna get over it, how long before you get over it, or how long. It's like, wait a minute, like you have literally impacted generations. And then, like I said, for most of us, at least those of us of Generation X, we are the first ones to grow up unencumbered by a political, racial, educational system that wasn't against you.
Right.
You know, my parents were children of the civil rights movement. You know what I'm saying? So my parents grew up in the Jim Crow South. So I'm the first generation to not be encumbered by that, but then there's this hurry up and get over and you're supposed to succeed, never mentioning how you have had generations of assistance or generations to get ahead, and even if you haven't, let's just be honest and say, but your life wasn't made harder because of who you are.
And that's the problem too. They want us to hurry up and get over it. They want us to not talk about it, not speak on it, so it could be forgotten, so that they could change things into their own way. That would be a good light upon them, and everything else you would not know about. Because if you look at it, even before some of this stuff come out with, the 1619 Project and so forth, you had things further back in history, such as they always spoke that King Solomon was the richest man ever.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that it was not him, it was Mansa Musa. Now, don't get me wrong, King Solomon had money.
Right.
He was good, but Mansa Musa uh, went way past him. And then if you look at it, even go further, there's always been the debate with the Middle Passage, where they would say it was only 12.1 million that was dumped over into the sea, but it's more on the level of 60 million.
I mean, anything that shines a light on the history, like I said, you have to be truthful about your history. You have to embrace the good with the bad. And that's not to say that everything was negative, but there's a lot of things that we have to take a look at and be honest and truthful about. Like we have to be honest and truthful about the Trail of Tears, and what happened during the relocation of the great people. When you look, and here's the thing, like none of us know who this land belonged to prior to the European settlers coming in, but there was a nation of tribes all across this, world,
all across this land, right?
But we don't know about those great civilizations.
They choose not to tell us much, And
I mean, but why isn't that part of our history books?
I agree with
like
you.
The Navajo
it
and
all,
the Cherokees.
Every bit of it should be part of the history books. I mean, you speak on, with the American Indian, that definitely should be part of it. But I guarantee you, if I go through just general history books, y'all, not really getting deep in everything, but just general, I would find more about the Bolshevik Revolution than I would find about the American Indian.
Because Europeans, there's the belief that Europeans are kind of truthful about their history. In Germany, they tell the truth about the Holocaust. We barely want to cover slavery here, and not only do we barely want to cover slavery, but we raise monuments to the losers that are just not coming down. Like, it's like, wait a minute, how you raise a monument?
But
They lost.
even within Europe, they, how can I say, they hid their history in a few different ways. I'm trying to give you a quick example I had in my head, but it's gone. But they spoke a lot of times on certain riches, how they got them and so forth, which was completely wrong.
That's true. Yeah.
Many times they got the riches through looting, killing and looting the lands.
Yeah, and bringing stuff back to Europe,
and then it was found, and then with what adventure or whatever they want to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's this great push for the European museums to give back their artifacts and things to the land from which they were taken or stolen from. So yeah, we have a right to correct our history and to be truthful about it.
And it takes the people. The people have to see that, hey, wait a minute, this was not how that went. Let me look deeper into so forth and whatever to make sure that they put it in the curriculum. That's why, as I just stated earlier, hey, if the kid is hurt because you told them the truth.
I mean, but the part of it is that we have to teach kids to fully embrace their history. This is who we are as a people. It's not who we were. And we can tell truth about it. Like, we can tell the truth about the Japanese relocation camps. We can tell the truth about that. We can tell the truth that, 1865, was one of the greatest expansions in American government and saw the full emancipation of the slave, only to be wiped out by peonage, and Jim Crow South, and the deals that were made to, in essence, to put the people in not near slavery, but slavery-like conditions. We need to tell the truth about lynching in this country. We need to tell the truth about how those who spoke out against lynching were, hunted down and made to suffer the wrath of the government, and how the government was slow to enact laws and legislation to pass, anti-lynching laws. We still don't have, I don't know if we passed it, but I don't know if we have the anti-lynching law now. You know what I'm saying? But even if we did just pass, we just passed it.
Right.
Exactly. So I say all of that to say that critical race theory, first and foremost, let's be honest, it's a higher level education. So unless you're in college, you're really not college.
But should not pieces of this theory? I mean, you don't have to do the full theory to a fourth grader, but pieces of it. Should it not be given to the children?
I mean, just as the lie was told to us that, Columbus sailed the ocean in 1692 on an ocean blue, and all of that stuff. Yeah, but we need to tell the truth that, when he arrived here, he arrived as a barbarian. They saw him as barbarians. He tried to enslave the people. Yeah, we need to tell the truth about that. But if we're going to tell the truth, are we going to tell the truth about MLK and some of his philandering ways? I
feel you should.
I agree too. Like I said, we put people on pedestals.
I was just about to say that we look up to these people.
Yep.
Then we also have to understand that they are human,
flawed,
right?
And that makes them more human. Like the fact is like, yeah, he was a great speaker, but yeah, he borrowed some ideas and some words from some other speakers and may not have a properly
but even
credited them, with their thoughts and stuff. But
agree. But even some of the speakers that he may have borrowed it from, they had history themselves.
True.
Yeah,
true. So I mean, we have to be honest, but let's talk about why they don't want us to talk about it. The fact is that we have a party here in America that's bent on autocracy, that they just want it to be their way. And so the one way you start doing that is you start lying to the people about their history and lying about what's happened. And you put yourself and elevate yourself up. There's a party in this country that's dedicated to not telling the truth, that sees themselves as superior and wants to give in to that idea. And as long as they keep leaning into it and they want to embrace this theory, that's what they're going to do, because it serves as a rallying cry. It's nothing that is wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong with, taking a critical look at history and having honest and good debates about it. But there's a certain party in this country that doesn't care about the truth, wants to see themselves as unfailing heroes, godlike complex, and will teach and want to teach to and anything that supports that, and anything that contradicts that idea, that runs opposite to that idea, they want to get rid of.
And see, that's the problem that I look at too, that America has supposed to be in this melting pot. That's supposed to be not exactly how, let's just say, the country that some had come from, which was England, and they was trying to get away from the ways of, I want to say it was King Charles. I'm not too sure at that
King
time.
Edward,
One of them, you know.
Yeah.
But they wanted to be that melting pot. That's why they was inviting so many different cultures in.
Well,
But
for the most part, now let's be honest about that. America, for the most part, has been successful as a melting pot. You know, when you look at other countries and how they've tried to integrate different people and races, there's always been some type of, I don't know, oppression, you know, genocide or things like that. America as a whole, when people come here, now granted, I ain't saying that it's perfect and, you know, Fruit Loops and Fruit Loops and paved ways. But for the most part, America is pretty good at integrating when we allow it, and we are truly our full American selves. We tend to embrace people of different races and different cultures. Now, yeah, like I said, you know, we're running into issues, and there's always been issues and challenges, but you don't see the wholesale slaughter or genocide
You're
of
right
people.
about that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not talking about.
Absolutely right about
It
that.
is not free from struggle. It is not free from strife. But if you had to choose to integrate any country, you know, on this earth, you know, America would probably be number 1 or 2 on the list of places where you might want to go and say, okay, I'm a minority, and where can I feel safe at? So let's be truthful about it. There are, and I'm not going to bash America. This is not that time to do that. There's a lot of great things to love about this country, but there's some things that we need to look at critically. And we don't do it to bash.
We do it to build.
We do it to build and to improve who we are as a people.
Yeah.
And we can only do that by taking a critical look.
Because like I said, sometimes you gotta get that bitter truth to grow to be better. You know, when you turn around and, you know, you get these fairy tale fibs or other, I'm trying to think of any way to saying it clean.
That's what it is.
You know, it doesn't get you nowhere. You think you're doing just fine and you're not doing nothing wrong, but you could be going completely wrong. Yeah.
Well, we will never see a critical race theory in this country if we can't even agree what happened on January 6th. There is a faction of this country that is dedicated to perpetuating the lie, because they perpetuate the lie because it keeps them in power, and they don't care about the truth. As long as because once you start with the lie, you got to keep with the lie. And so, you know, any deviation from the lie,
in a way,
weakens your power.
In a way, you don't, because, you know, if you realize that when you've been going the wrong way, and you could be man or woman enough to stand up and say, you know what, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and, you know, face that little bit. You, in my book, in the lines of history, will have more respect than the guy or girl out there screaming his lie over and over and over again. You know,
look, I've said it before, and I know I'm the pessimistic one. They don't care.
Well,
they don't care. They want to hold on to power for the sake of holding on to power.
See, and I know they don't care. You are absolutely right. But the thing is, we have to care enough. We have to push enough to, guess what? Shut them up.
I'm at the point now where I'm kind of like, I don't know if there's enough of us. I don't know if there's enough of us to push it.
I agree, but you know what? In a way, I believe that there is. It's just the fact that the noise or the truth is not loud enough out there, so that others realize, who may think right along the lines with us, realize that maybe we can do something.
I don't know. I hate to say this, but I don't think we're getting smarter as a country. When you have people rooting for Russia right now, you know, and a certain spokesperson on Fox News advocating for Russia, and nobody's taking a critical look. And I'm citing this as just an example of my concerns. You know, like, if you study history, you understand why what is happening over in Russia may be an issue to Western democracies. But you got people in this part of the country that think, Putin is a better president than Biden. And you're sitting there like, for real? Like, is this where we're going as a country?
You got to understand those of that news channel, because I may know the person you're talking about, but
Rhymes with trucker.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyhow, individuals like that, they like to make this noise to keep their eye in the media, well, keep their face in the media, keep everybody talking about them and all that. But we all know that they're a waste of time and space. Now, I will happily say that they are literally a waste of time and space. And unfortunately, they have those who listen to them.
You underestimate them to your demise. You underestimate the strength that echo chamber has towards your demise. And see, the problem is we're all in our own echo chambers. Now, I occasionally will watch said station just to figure out, what's going on.
Well, you have to know.
You have to, but we undereducate them. We underestimate them to our own demise.
You have to know the ways of those who want to do harm against you.
Exactly. And some of the things they talk about, you're just like, are you serious? Like, what facts do you have to back this up? And it's all conspiracy theories. Like, literally, they just sit at home, come up with some kind of conspiracy to figure out how to put out there, and they put it out there. So hence, and I come back to this, the critical race theory. It was meant as a rallying cry. They needed something to rally around, and someone found this one little thing. Like I said, it's not even really taught in grammar schools or the educational school. It's taught mostly at the higher level.
But even, okay, with everything, critical race theory, the 1619 Project and so forth.
And it's not just that. They also talking about what happened in the Holocaust and whether or not it's real and whether or not the Civil War. I mean, let's go beyond. Was the Civil War over slavery? Now, there are those out there who will say, no, it wasn't. It was about states' rights. It was about the states' rights to own slaves, right? So, but if you have, and we have to have this, there's this belief that we have to have whole ideas equally. You know what I'm saying? Like, just because you believe it, I'm supposed to, like, nah, some ideas are stupid and we need to call it out. Like, not every idea is brilliant or deserves.
What people don't understand too, with that, and I mean to cut you there, but with different ideas, that's how you learn to grow. This is how you learn to grow, because you can have one, I can have one, they could be totally different. But I may learn something from you that I did not think about.
I forget who said, I think it was Will Walton or Paul Walton or something like that. And it's like, no, we don't have to create all the ideas as equal. Like, this whole idea that the Civil War wasn't over slavery, that's not true. Like, it was literally Fort Sumter fired. They wanted to keep their slaves. And that's what the Civil War was about. It wasn't about states' rights. It was about whether or not the nation can stay together as a whole because of this fundamental stain on the nation's soul, which was slavery.
But you know what you learn? You learn what excuse that they would use to justify themselves. So yet you still learn.
But when the excuse becomes a fact, that's when I have a problem. That's when we start teaching that excuse or that we should teach both equally and let people decide. No, there are certain things that are fundamentally true. If I hold this up, now if you want to talk about, God and stuff, well, if it stays in there, that's God. But if it falls, that's gravity.
There it is.
There it is, So, we don't have to teach, there's a place for facts and scientific and science and reason and logic. Those are the fundamental things that bind us together as a society. There are things that belong in the realm of belief. You can teach your beliefs at home, whether or not you choose to follow God, Yahweh, Allah, Confucius, Buddha, whoever you choose to follow. That's a belief, and I have no right to tell you that your belief is wrong. But when there are certain facts, no, I can tell you when your facts are wrong,
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's not H3O. You put H3O, you got a whole different chemical.
There it is.
H2O, you can
got
drink.
water.
Yeah,
Right.
you can drink.
There you
I
go.
don't think you want to drink H3O. So,
No doubt, no doubt. Well, hey, check it out. We're going to touch more on how to teach some of this theory when we come back from this musical break. This is Elevated Vibes on IntellectualRadio.com. What's good, everybody? We are back. This is Elevated Vibes on IntellectualRadio.com. Let me remind you guys, if you want to join the conversation, the number is 708-223-8953. Once again, that is 708-223-8953, or you could join us on Facebook Live. Now, today we are talking about critical race theory and the big uproar about it. All right, we were talking about a lot with the education and so forth, brother. The thing is, was found out that in 2018, only 8% of high school children understood that slavery was a central reason for the Civil War.
How many? 8%?
8%.
Right. Then we just get through talking about
Yeah,
this?
and yeah, without a doubt. Now, my thing is, because, I was talking about, hey, if we got to teach them in fourth grade, bits and pieces, hey, it is what it is. They get mad about it. Tell me something. If you were a teacher or, a school administrator and so forth, and you gonna go ahead and push this through in your curriculum, how would you do it?
I mean, first of all, the introduction of race is a very sensitive subject. I don't think I became I hate to use the word racially conscious until about 8th grade. That's when I recognized it was not because of anything at my school, because I primarily went to a school dominated with children of color. I think we may have had 2 students of non-color, 3 maybe, but I think we had, and so when you grow up in a majority like that, the idea of race was kind of a foreign concept. Like, I knew like ideas of black, but I didn't fully comprehend. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't fully comprehend that. I didn't until about 7th, 8th grade. And I think I had an idea of it. I remember Black History Month. I remember that song, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. But it's a funny concept to introduce to children. I give you an example. One day I was out taking my son, my youngest son, who was my same complexion, and And for those of you who don't know, I'm how would you say honey latte complexion. I go with that honey latte complexion,
Okay,
sweet like that. But anyway,
go ahead.
I it was taking my son, and we were out walking the dog, and um my son asked if grandma and grandpa were slaves because they were learning about slavery. And then he asked me if he was a slave, and I was like, no. And I was like, I asked him about me, and he was like, oh, dad, you're black. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm the same complexion as you. And he was like, oh, and his mom, who's your complexion, he was like, oh, I thought mommy was black. I didn't know you were black. And I was just kind of like, okay, So this whole concept, especially when you're trying to explain to kids the physicality of it and what does it mean to be black, it's a hard concept to introduce and understand, especially in the context of when you don't identify that. You know what I'm saying? Like my kids, they know, but it's not something we've talked about, or I didn't talk about when they were coming up. So that's the first question you gotta ask is, when do we introduce this concept of race? Unfortunately, the concept of race for most children of color comes up in the context of some incident where you're called something other than your name, some derogatory term, something like that, or you're made to feel like other or different. So for me, that happened the summer of seventh grade going into eighth grade. I was in a certain community in Chicago on the south side near Comiskey Park at the time. And, I was called that name, and that's when I became radically conscious of who I was in this world and how my melanin was both a threat and a danger to who I am as a person. I happened to be in that community and had to beat it out that community because of who I was, So how do we introduce this concept of race? And I don't know when you do that. Sixth grade, seventh grade. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, one thing I do remember as a kid, um, I'm really trying to remember what grade I was in.
I know you gotta go back. Go
Quiet,
way back.
quiet, quiet, quiet. But I do remember looking at some of the social study books, and it was a thought in there about with slavery, and it was trying to. If I knew the exact words, I would tell y'all, but I don't remember. It's been a while, but it directed um the way the words were directed. It was saying that those who came over as slaves were better off than those who were still in Africa.
Mm.
That's how the words was directed. It was a small paragraph. It wasn't even that much. But I looked at that and I'm like, how? Even then, I'm like, really? you know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I respect America to a
Mhm.
point. But to say I'm better off here than I was there, and what my ancestors had been through, how was that better?
I mean, I remember not. There's this dissonance that took place, like when you learn about slaves, but there's this cognitive dissonance that, oh, these were my people. Like I'm
Right.
saying, like you don't, as a child, and I'm only speaking for mine now. There may be some children who are more, prodigious than I am,
Hmm.
smarter than I am. But even when I was learning about slavery, there was no connection per se that I'm the descendants of a slave. You know what I'm saying? You were just learning about slavery as a concept.
Hmm.
And it's not until, like I said, sixth, seventh grade where you make that connection like, oh, these were my people. Oh, these are who I came from. These are my ancestors, So, and, of course, seventh, eighth grade, and then, eighth grade, I don't want to say radically thrown into it, but I started fully embracing this concept and what it means and starting to learn, what it means, and talking to my parents about their history and understanding, the civil rights movement and what it means.
But then the thing is, too, like I was saying, to throw it out to where you start teaching the kids this, because it should be taught in grade school. In my eyes, yes, it should. It really should. Now, to what level, it still needs to be seen in my book. But even just touching on what you just said and what I just said, I also remember, because I was from a predominantly African American neighborhood,
Mhm.
and not far away was a predominantly Caucasian American neighborhood. And trust me, they let you know the difference if you were there. They
Mhm.
let you know. I mean, I didn't stretch that far into it as in grade school, but once I got into high school, you get out, you travel, you do your thing, you do whatever you do. And again, they let you know. So, do I feel that it should be some concept of understanding race for not only us, but as for Caucasians to understand what we have dealt with, what we have went through, and where we want to go, because we just want to grow. That's it. We
Well,
want to grow and be better, and we want this country to be better, but we want to grow and do that.
I mean, let's look at it as a global lesson, not just a lesson for people of color and a lesson for people of non-color. Let's look at it as a global lesson that this is who we are fundamentally as a people. And maybe that's the other thing. It's like we need to stop separating, if we're going to fundamentally think of ourselves as Americans, then we have to fully embrace that American history as Americans. Like it wasn't just, it was we as Americans who wiped Native Americans off their land. We have to embrace it as an American.
Agreed.
That's my history.
Agreed. I agree.
As an American, it was our history is that we, forcefully put Japanese in internment camps.
Hmm.
That is something we did as Americans. When these people are shot by police violence, that's done at your on your behalf as an American. And that's what I'm saying. As Americans, we should be outraged. We should be upset about the lack of history and full embracement of the history because it denies us as part of our history. You can't know who you truly are as a people. You can't say you're a great people.
Hmm.
You can't say that you've overcome when you don't even know what you've overcome. You can't say
Exactly right.
you're a melting
Exactly.
pot without all of that stuff. You have to understand the history of this country and fully embrace the good and the bad. Or as they say, you got to take the crickets with the straight. You just can't focus on the straights.
Well, personally, I would love, and I'm gonna say this again, I would love for knowledge like that not only to be within America, but throughout the world. Let's make it worldwide.
Mhm.
Okay, because you know, as we may know some of our strife here in America, there was a lot of, you know, and sometimes you have folks that want to keep it separate. They want to say, oh, well, you're from the Caribbean, you're not from America. You're from, Africa, whatever.
Mhm.
Truth be said, they are still our brothers and sisters. All right. And it's a lot of people out there that want to keep it separate, but no, there's a lot out there that they strive and struggle for the same thing to make it better for each and every one of us. So let's make it worldwide. I'm totally game with that. And I wish I knew of a group or whatever that would like to do that because I would like to jump in that group.
I mean, it's out there to learn. Like I said, I learned a lot of my history through movies, and then I'll read, the books and stuff. Like if the movie illuminates a certain place in history, I'll go and try to learn a little bit more about it. Um, and like I said, there's so much that we don't know that I believe would illuminate what's going on. Like I said, I've been saying for a long time, America's in the midst of a cold civil war. And if you look at the history prior to 1860, you look at the 1855 through 1859 and what's going on, and how the other side was talking about the other side, you'll see a lot of the same rhetoric that led up to the Civil War. you know um and so if we're not careful and if we want to fully deny history, then yeah, we do so at our own peril. And we'll find ourselves going down that same road that our forefathers fought. When my man said, four score, you know, and he came forth and said one of the greatest speeches ever, to try to heal the nation. But if we would ignore what he did and what those people died for, we do so at our peril.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, we all know there's a number of states trying to make sure they ban critical race theory completely, and it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
And on my eyes, in my opinion, these are definitely the states that are on the wrong side of history. What could the federal government do to make them change their mind, make them change their ways?
Well, you got to remember, education is one of those blah blah blah. Education is one of those rights that is reserved for the states. Our Constitution says nothing about education. It's one of those rights that was reserved specifically for the states.
But isn't it certain, educational guidelines that is still
I
something on
mean,
the level of federal?
yeah, you can set certain guidelines. You can set monies. If they do certain things. I just don't think there's the political will to do that now. Though it's like we're fight. If we can't even agree on wearing a mask, what do you think is going to happen with education? And I mean, we're seeing it, the villainization of teachers. We're not trusting our teachers and our scientists or what to be taught in schools. And so now you're seeing pretty like I don't understand like the burning of books. Like we just saying we're gonna take these books out.
Didn't they
Like,
do something like that in Idaho
well,
not that long ago?
I mean,
It was some of that sort.
I mean, I remember something similar happening in Germany on the night of the broken glass too. But you know what I'm saying? So and it's crazy. It's like, yo, if you telling me to burn a book, then there's something in there I must need. You know what I'm saying? Like, how is knowledge dangerous? You know what I'm saying? Well, that's not true. A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, um, but we should trust our educators and people who know who have been doing this. And I don't know how we got away from that. Like where, parents all of a sudden want to say what is and what isn't taught in school. It's like, well, what do you know about preparing young? Like we've gotten away, like we think of the word elite as bad. Like the other side sees elite as bad. You know what I'm saying? But when don't you want something that's elite? Everybody wants an elite education. I guarantee you want the elite cardio surgeon. You ain't going for the dude that was last in the class.
Right.
It's like, oh, I bet you want elite then. You want your SWAT team to be elite. You want your army to be elite. You want your Navy SEALs to be elite. But when it comes to education, nah, we don't want that elitist left education and stuff. Like, are you serious? Like, elite used to mean something. It's like, you're getting exposed to the best of the best of the best. The
Which should
highest
be
ideas.
a general thing. I mean,
Nah, not anymore.
well, it
Nah.
should have been.
It's a race for the lowest denominator right now. Common, who can be the stupidest?
But if you're coming to, go for this career in education, no matter of what level it is, you should be taught that I am going to make sure that they get the best of everything. This is what I am doing for my students. This is what I am doing for my community, my family, and so forth. And to deny parts of it just because it makes you feel bad.
I mean, I'm gonna go. Like I said, I'm gonna go because I know we're coming to the top of the hour. I'm gonna go with what my theory is. There's no problem with CRT, critical race theory, or the 1619 project. It is a rallying cry for the right to have something to push back against. That is the whole fundamental problem. Like if we were to have a critical discussion about race theory and what it means and all of that stuff, sure, cool. And we can agree to disagree on certain things and move forward. This is education. It's an art, it's not a science. And there are certain things like, why are we still teaching trigonometry? We still teach it. I mean, I don't think I've used it in my adult life ever. I'm sure I have, and I'm sure we'll get calls. So sure you've used trigonometry. Sure, okay. But
You haven't used it much, though. Let's
not
just say
much,
that.
so there's definitely rooms for improvement and things like that. But at the end of the day, it is just a fundamental. Let's look at it for what it is. It's just a rally cry. It's not. There's no problems. If you ask most of the people on the right, what problems do you have with it? What does it mean to you? What parts of it do you disagree with? I bet you I'd say let's go 7 out of 10. Probably couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you what problem they have with race theory.
All right. Well, my thing with their issue with critical race theory is this: if you're riding a horse, you put the blinders on the horse. Why? Because you want the horse to go where you want the horse to go.
Wow.
Now, critical race theory begins to take, well, I feel it's already began, but let's just say hypothetically, it begins to take the blinders off. It begins to allow folks to make their own theory and decisions about where this country, or even I'm gonna take it worldwide, where this world has been and where I want to take it. You know, so they have an issue with it because they want us to keep our blinders on, and we do as they say we do without question. That's what we can't do. That's why we have to keep the conversation going. And I implore y'all, everyone that is listening to us, that is watching us on Facebook Live, YouTube, or whatever, if you got to use this to keep the conversation going, keep it going. All right. If you're seeing us right now on Facebook, share it. Employ your people to get into the conversation. All right. Speak freely. Now you will get a response from us. Yeah, that's gonna happen, you know. but the conversation will keep going. And again, we can learn and grow from it. Because those that want to keep it the status quo, that how it has been going,
Or take away knowledge.
right? They don't want to do nothing but keep us under control, keep those blinders on. So that change has to be. All right. Any last words, brother?
Just as I always say, you are an inspiration. If you're listening to this, that is proof to you that God is not done with your mission on this earth. Sometimes, we find ourselves in a storm, going to a storm, or coming from a storm. Either way, we survive. And I'm telling you that if you are listening to me right now, you have 100% survival rate. Keep up the good work. You may not feel like you're succeeding, but you sure ain't failing. All right. As my dad used to say, 2 feet above beats 6 feet below. All right. So stay up, stay positive, keep a good head on your shoulders, and keep striving and moving forward. And we shall be back next week on Elevated Vibes.
You got that right. You got that right. And hey, my only saying, because you just went off that striving, is as I always say, all right, let's not strive to be famous amongst men. We all could do that because we all bleed. Okay? Let's strive to be famous amongst those of a higher plane. This is Elevated Vibes, and we will check y'all out next week. Peace.